Hey everyone, hopefully the sun will stop patrolling me today. We'll see. I'm going to try to keep a little bit of closer eye on it. After the last issue, which lasted like a freaking hour and a half, this one will not be as long. Someone asked, what are some of the creatures, monsters, beasts of this world? I'm actually going to start in a weird direction. I'm going to start with something called the thrush. Now, those of you who've been following the campaign may be like, well, that's not really a monster or a creature or a beast, but it kind of is and kind of isn't. Nobody, except for me, of course, knows the origination of the thrush. The thrush is sort of a... Imagine, okay, the thrush exists across a chunk of the show empire, under it, technically. And the thrush is like a combination of many different plants, which all basically share the same root system. They're all connected, physically, literally connected. And each one of them... Did I hit play on that? Yeah, I did. Okay, we're good, we're good. Just, sometimes I can't tell if this stuff is moving in the background here, but as you can see, it is. It's just very slow. Thrush is all interconnected, and it all produces the same kind of orangish, amber tinted with a little bit of red appearance to it. Now, okay. Sorry, I've been waiting for that text message for a while, and it just happened. So the thrush is like, it's everywhere. It covers a colossal chunk of land. We're talking like, if you imagine the entire Midwest of the United States, that's all thrush. Now, thrush is on the surface, but it actually goes down beneath the surface quite a bit. People aren't 100% sure how far down thrush goes, but it goes down quite a ways, to give that away a little bit. Now, thrush is weird, because thrush is incredibly dangerous to people under the right circumstances, but otherwise is completely non-violent. For example, if you stand on thrush, you're fine, as long as you move relatively quickly. If you fall asleep on thrush, you'll probably wake up dead. See, thrush will naturally grow to encompass and consume all that's on it, so there's not a lot of fauna that tends to grow on that flora, if you follow. It is a pseudo-carnivorous plant thing. It's really hard to describe distinctly. It's kind of like the Borg for plants, except it doesn't want to go past a certain point. This is the unique thing about thrush. It always wants to grow to a certain level, and that level is across the entirety of the thrush. So, for example, if they want to build a new city on this area, they have to plan for that, and basically the city is going to be plated. All show cities and roads are constantly, have this huge chunks of asphalt and concrete plated down, or in some cases actually metal, in order to keep the thrush down, but they know that's going to cause the thrush to grow elsewhere, so they plan for this. There's a whole committee whose entire purpose is planning new real estate developments and new construction projects around the thrush. Now, the thrush can actually be harvested too, and it can be used for many different purposes, some of which are medicinal, some of which are psychedelic, some of which are simply food. It can actually be eaten. The thrush stuff can be eaten and can be nourishing. Again, that is also something that has to be done carefully and in balanced measures. You don't want to over-harvest, because then it's going to overgrow in order to compensate for that, and that might not be growing the place you want it to. Thrush can and has in the past grow up through those plates and concrete things that keep the city safe so people aren't walking on thrush. But it's only done that if someone has thrown things out of balance, so that's not something that happens normally. So most show people are completely inundated. They're not inundated. It's normalized for them. The thrush is a part of everyday life for them. Now, the thrush again is still dangerous. Like I said, if anything is on the thrush, literally physically on the thrush, and it is a living thing, not just a block of concrete, but like an animal or a bug or a person, and you stay there, the thrush will just kind of slowly grow up around you to claim you, and eventually kind of drag you down into it. People who die this way, fortunately, because this is not a setting that someone else has written, but it's a setting I have written, they die pretty painlessly. They are paralyzed, and they basically never wake up. They go to sleep if they're not asleep. They stay asleep if they are asleep. They never wake up. They die in their sleep. There's no pain there. They're just kind of... Their nervous system is basically turned off. And the thrush basically consumes them and their mass in order to nourish itself. The thrush also does this to other things. People are pretty sure that the thrush actually literally lives off of the ley lines directly, which is where it gets the primary amount of its nourishment. So that's the thrush. Again, kind of a normal feature amongst the show. Excuse me, for a large chunk of the show. I've already talked about golems. I did a whole separate video about golems, so I'm going to skip over them. That's the first one on my list over here. Armadillos. Okay, so these are long, short reptiles that are covered in a very hard shell, and this shell actually has bristles, like if this is the armadillo, these bristles are coming out like this, which terminate in very bony, short, very sharp spikes and blades. They are extremely territorial and extremely hostile creatures. They are very much, if they have claimed a chunk of land, most often what happens is people will just kind of actively change trade routes to go around it. The only exceptions are major trade routes, like the Gold Road, for example. If armadillos try to claim a spot on the Gold Road, and this has happened, the Navarran military, military, by the way, will move in to remove them. They're pretty dangerous creatures. They're not very strong, they're basically glass cannons, but they can do a lot of damage in a very short period of time. A lot of that is destructive damage, too. A pack of armadillos could probably level a decent chunk of a city if left alone to do so. Armadillos can't really be domesticated, so that's not really a thing that happens. They're simply too aggressive and too violent of a species in general. Some people will basically plant armadillos in a spot hoping they claim it in order to help them defend it, but they don't always claim that spot. And armadillos like to move. They are territorial roaming creatures, so what they claim as their own will change from time to time. Armadillos are primarily found in the western and northwestern chunks of the continent, so they're a very common feature in the Navarre region and some of the Glendon Wood area of Alluvia, as well as the Collier area and Stonehold. Carenzi. Now, the party has basically not encountered these suckers. Carenzi are almost universally found down in the show territories, which is also the area which has been seen the least on camera. The Carenzi are communal, rodent-like stalker creatures, very long, a little more like ferrets than anything else. They have very, very powerful hind legs, which leads them to be able to basically lunge forward and make long, leaping strides, so they're very fast. And they almost always travel as part of a pack. They have very much the wolf mentality, pack mindset, pack group, that kind of a thing. Again, social creatures. They are small and not particularly durable. However, they have one thing going for them. Their teeth are extraordinarily hard and can pierce a lot of armor in lore and a lot of DR in stats. So they can do a lot of damage if they manage to get a hold of you, which is generally considered to be a bad thing. Carenzi fur is actually prized for its particular colors, because they have a wide variety of colors, spots, patterns, etc. on the fur. Man, we've just got some weird lighting stuff going on today, don't we? Anyways, they also let's sit up a bit. Let's help the posture. That'll help. They also Carenzi teeth are prized not just as decorative, but for literal functional utility. A knife which terminates in a Carenzi teeth is probably going to be more capable than, for example, one that terminates in an iron or copper or bronze or otherwise tip, right? This is true for spears as well. Carenzi are considered a delicacy amongst most of the show races, most especially the Sclavi. They really, really enjoy the rather succulent, very almost fruity, sweet meat that Carenzi is. Then we have the Chittics. Now, the Chittics are fun. The Chittics roam all over the place. There is no given location that there are more Chittics than less, with one exception, which is the swamps and the northern end of the show regions on the southern edge of the dry reach regions. The Chittics are very long, chitinous insects. They've got these tails which have spikes that they can grow into and out of them, and they can whip those tails at extreme speed, which causes those spikes to attack someone. So they're basically a ranged attacker for all intents and purposes. Again, Chittics can be found basically anywhere. Chittics have they're solitary by nature. They almost never roam in a group. Generally, when a new Chittic, when Chittics mate or whatever, they come together, mate, and then they leave, leaving the newly formed Chittics to grow up on their own. Chittics also tend to fight amongst each other quite a bit. Chitic armor is considered one of the best cheap accesses of armor. Chitics are not actually that dangerous to a well-armed adventurer or military individual, mercenary, whatever. So they're one of the more commonly farmed creatures to make armor that is of the light or medium variety. They tend to prefer swamps. I already mentioned that. Maticurs. Maticurs are terrifyingly impressive. Okay, Maticurs are believed to be a variant of reed sharks, which we'll talk about in a moment. Maticurs function on 3 legs, 1 massive, powerful hind leg, 2 fore, and they have massive horns, very, very strong, long fur, and extremely durable and thick hides. The smallest Maticur tends to stand at close to 7 feet tall at the shoulder, which overall makes them taller than 7 feet tall and much, much longer. Maticurs are the kind of things that can level towns. These things are very durable and insanely strong. Maticurs are pretty much only found in the Osteth region and are one of the more regular dangers you find down there. Maticurs are very social creatures, seem to have at least some intellect, some intellectual capacity to them, and are naturally resistant to magic in addition to having a huge DR and high AC as well. Maticur hide is considered one of the strongest forms of hide in the entire world. In fact, it is, I think, the 2nd strongest form of hide in the world. So Maticur pelts are extremely well prized and can only a truly masterwork crafter and weaver can actually work with Maticur hide. It's just that difficult to work with, but it produces some amazing stuff. The Maticurs actually have been sighted also in the crater region, but considering most people don't go up to the crater, it's kind of a rare thing. I mentioned the 7 foot tall being the smallest Maticurs. Maticurs can be as tall as a building. Some of them can be taller than a building. A lot of the military of the Osteth Republic's efforts is involved around these creatures specifically, because they have to maintain a balance. Again, these are intelligent creatures. Not super intelligent, but definitely intelligent. You know, they're not sapient. But they do know well enough in order to leave well enough alone if they're not bothered. But if people try to go hunting them, or if they try to keep their population down, Maticurs will retaliate. They will literally track whoever attacked them to their source camp to attack them. Now, the Republic does this on purpose in some cases, luring Maticurs towards a specific fortress, which then the fortress will then try to destroy the Maticur. Yeah, the whole fortress. They do this in order to try and keep the population down. Otherwise, Maticur's population would keep going up. So it's a form of population control they perform. But they never try to cull them all the way back down, not only because they're valuable for their hide and meat. Maticur meat is incredibly nutritious, and actually magically nutritious as well. It will literally give you healing and endurance and that kind of thing. But in addition to that, they just don't believe in wiping out a species, right? They're trying to maintain a balance between the two. Reed sharks, well, these are much more common, much smaller. We're talking, these things are about the size of a wolf or a dog or a cat in some cases. Very small creatures. Again, 3-legged, 1 hind, 2 fore. They are named because they usually have these fins coming up their back. They can be in different patterns. It can be 2 like this, or 1 in the middle, or all 3 going out. I don't have 3 hands, but you get the idea. They come in a large number of different skin colors and their scales that they have. Again, they are intelligent, just like the Maticurs are, but because of their much reduced size and strength, they tend to be much more domesticated. It is actually one of the most common creatures to be domesticated, as far as for purposes of companionship or defense or whatever. You know, beware of dog, beware of beware of reed shark. It's a very common thing. Reed shark hide is still very durable and still very valuable to people. Reed sharks are still a danger. They're just nowhere near on the level of takes an entire fortress to defeat danger like the Maticurs are. So that's the difference. In case anyone hasn't put 2 and 2 together, Maticurs are innately magical creatures. Reed sharks are not. It is very likely someone did some magical experimentation once upon a time, and that resulted in Maticurs being a thing. Shreth. We have hardly seen any Shreth. Most of the Shreth are in the alluvian area. They prefer the sun, the grass. That's the biome they're most comfortable in. They are partially carnivorous. They're actually omnivores, but they're primarily carnivorous. They also enjoy plant-like. They have bony spikes that stick out of their back and their shoulders. They're squat. Their arms are very long. and enable them to move similar in a way to how a gorilla can move over land at great speeds, except not at all. That's a bad image. I shouldn't have put that in your head. They have a completely different body type than a gorilla, so that's not valid. And the sun is my enemy once again. Go away, sun. Go away. Nobody loves you. They're pretty big on average, not as big as Matockers, but still large. However, unlike a Matocker, which is 7 foot tall at the shoulder at the lowest, a Shreth is about 7 feet tall at the shoulder on average. So that's the normal size for a Shreth. Shreths can actually be very... Oh my god! And then the sun is like, nah, you said horrible things. I'm just going to leave this screen up to readjust on the fly. Look at this! Look at this. It's literally as I adjust it and then the sun changes right there. I swear to God. Hate you, son. Okay, so Shreth, unlike reed sharks, unlike Matockers, are very stupid creatures. Intelligence-wise, they have no real strong intellectual capability. Although, actually, I guess that's a lie. I mean at the higher level. They don't have the capacity for, like, sapience and the like, but for animals, they're actually quite intelligent. I'd say, in real-life terms, I'd put them at the level of most dogs, most domestic dogs. So definitely more intelligent than most normal animals. Shreth, as a result, tend to be very common for domestication purposes. Shreth meat and Shreth hide are... more valuable than reed shark meat and hide. Also usually harder to get and much harder to farm. Most Shreths that are domesticated are not done so for their hides, they are done so for their defensive purposes. There are actually groups, martial groups, mercenary groups, military groups, who employ Shreths in battle. Kind of similar to how they employ Mabari in Dragon Age, but again, Shreth is not as intelligent as a Mabari, but it's a similar relation between the two. Shreths can be pretty deadly in combat. Scroll down a bit here. Also, there is one big difference between Shreth and reed shark. Shreth tend to have a little bit more of a refined appearance than the reed sharks. Reed sharks tend to be smelly and dirty and black, especially because of the nature of their scales. Shreth can be combed and can basically stand in... If you're a high society person, you're more likely to have a Shreth, either as a pet or as a guard dog, than you are have a reed shark. If you're poor, you're more likely to have a reed shark, because reed sharks are cheaper and easier to train. But a Shreth, you can actually comb its fur, you can make it smell nice, you can bathe it. They'll be fine with this kind of a thing. So that's very common amongst high society, especially amongst Upper Illuvians. The Cyraloon. I don't think the party has literally ever encountered these things. These... I gotta be honest, despite the Asheron's Call relevance here, these have actually been modeled basically after chocobos, for all intents and purposes. They are different than chocobos in a couple of key ways. First of all, they are not that intelligent. In fact, they are very unintelligent. These are probably the most unintelligent creatures I've actually run by, as I've been going down this list so far. Cyraloon are also really, really dangerous. They are omnivorous, they are tall, their necks are very tall. Their neck, based on their presentation, imagine a chocobo, but if the neck was long like a giraffe's, and they had more feathers and the ability to fly, then you've got a Cyraloon. So I guess they really don't have much to do with chocobos when I think about it. They tend to stand on those two legs. As I said, they can fly normally. They can only fly for short distances. It actually wears them out briefly. They are quite large, as I already mentioned, thanks to the giraffe necks. Even ignoring the neck, though, an average Cyraloon can get up to about, I guess that would be about 6 foot high at the leg. So like 9 feet tall total. Not counting the head, obviously, head and neck. They are incredibly horrible creatures. They are just vicious, terrible, unpleasant things. They will attack anything and everything around them, including other Cyraloon. They are actually a unique creature in the fact that they do not need to mate to have children. Cyraloon will basically produce its own eggs without external influence. It is highly believed that Cyraloon, damn you son, are some kind of magical creature that went completely wrong. Due to this unusual biology. Cyraloon feathers are extremely valuable and prized, partially because of how difficult it is to get them, partially because Cyraloon feathers tend to be very exotic looking, very elaborate. Lots of colors, whole different patterns. Even often you'll get two feathers from a same cerulean that look completely different from each other. The feathers themselves are a very strange combination of very soft and very durable. If you made an armor of just these feathers, it would actually function as real armor, and be much more comfortable than most armor would be. So yeah, that's a thing. Their beaks also tend to be valued for trinkets or for utility use because of the sharpness of them. And again, ceruleans are pretty vicious creatures. And again, omnivores. They will actually eat other creatures or people if they can. They have a fondness for shiny things. There have actually been entire groups of guards, soldiers, and mercenaries who have made a living doing nothing more than defending caravans that happen to be going through areas that have cerulean known to be in them. Sometimes they're not attacked at all, but usually the merchants think it's worthwhile to defend them, just in case a single cerulean notices them. It's like, whoa! Cerulean are pretty mean. Cerulean aren't just in the desert, though. In fact, they are primarily in the Osteth. Another horrible creature that exists in the Osteth. Speaking of horrible creatures that exist in the Osteth, Ursins. Okay. Now, Ursins are basically large, unusual cat-like creatures. Now, there's actually two types of Ursins, basically. There's the type you're going to see everywhere else, and there's the type you're going to see in the Osteth. You're probably noticing a trend here. Everywhere else, the Ursins are no danger at all. No more than like a house cat is, despite their size, and they tend to be pretty big. They can get larger than most Siberian tigers, but like the size of an average real-life tiger is about the average size of Ursin, except wider and longer tail. But Ursins, they're very calm. They're very laid back. They're not going to attack you. You know, they're not going to want to do anything to provoke you. They're fine with you being here and doing whatever. So they're not really going to be a danger or a threat to just about anyone. The Ursins in the Osteth are completely different. Now, this is believed to not be any magical change. It is believed to be the fact that the Ursins who live in the Osteth have to be incredibly vicious, dangerous predators to survive in the Osteth, because it's just that dangerous of an area. So this is probably just a byproduct of real evolution, as opposed to I turned into a salamander evolution. That was my power supply. So now the one thing that makes the Ursins unique, first of all, their fur is actually very, very well prized because it is extremely soft, extremely comfortable, and basically has that sort of implication of being wealthy. If you have an Ursin robe or an Ursin scarf, it's well considered to be something that is elaborate and exotic and expensive and all that, even though it's actually not. It's kind of the lobster situation, if you know what I mean by that. So societal expectation has made it that way. And I think the dog needs to go out, so I'm just going to do this really quick, because I don't want the dog to start barking at me. So come on, get out of here. Get out of here. Go. Go. You don't want to go. Why are you bothering me then? Okay, you don't want to go out. That's fine. Sorry, guys. I know we do these without edits. Ugh. So it's actually pretty easy and common to get a hold of Ursin fur. It is actually a hard fur to work with in order to maintain that softness and sleekness, so that's a thing. And again, they can come in a wide variety of patterns, but most of them are leaning towards the light end of the spectrum. So one other thing about Ursins I haven't mentioned, though. Obviously, the Ursins in the Osteth are dangerous, vicious bastards, usually the kind of things that will attack anything on sight, and not as like an aggressive, I hate you thing, but more of a I have to attack you or else you might eat me kind of a thing. Fun place to live. However, Ursins do have a natural ability. Basically, they have a really, really high stealth skill. They actually have a natural chameleon aspect to their fur. This can be brought out through weaving, by the way. It is possible to, remember I mentioned that elaborate thing, it is possible through weaving or through specific crafting to make an Ursin robe that will change colors on command, basically, or it can be used to make you blend with the background a little bit. It's more for look and for style than it is for actual practical utility. But the Ursins themselves use it to hide, or to hunt, or to prowl. An Ursin that is completely still can basically chameleoid itself into the background so well that most people cannot see them. They're effectively invisible. This is especially true in the Osteth, as I mentioned earlier, so that's kind of a tricky thing. Tuskers. Now this is a funny one. Tuskers are not monsters or beasts. I only mention them because until very recently everyone thought they were, and everyone basically still thinks they are. Only the party and a few other unique individuals are aware of the fact that Tuskers are in fact intelligent sapient life forms that are so technologically advanced they approach Star Trek level. But for just about the rest of the world, Tuskers are these rarely heard of rumors of massive, dangerous creatures, which are incredibly powerful and incredibly dangerous. Everything I've been mentioning before, I keep emphasizing Maticurs are horrible, Cyraloon are horrible, Ursins can be horrible. They all pale compared to Tuskers. The rare times Tuskers have been sighted are usually either in Crater or in the Dyers. These things can actually live in the Dyers, and this is true. There are some who survive in the Dyers. They are incredibly resistant, incredibly strong, and incredibly fast. And they happen to be very dexterous with those paw claws they've got going on. Yeah. So that whole Tusker army thing that was just announced, by my perspective, yeah. Grievers. Remember, every time you ask a comment about Grievers, they get stronger. Kill the world, my minions. I'm kidding. I'm not actually doing that. Grievers are strong enough, plenty as is. There's not much to share about Grievers in character, which is what these discussions are, in character lore. So all I can say about Grievers is that they are skyscraper-sized, and it takes airships, plural, and entire fortresses, plural, to push them back whenever they approach the land masses, whenever they try to escape from the Dyers. Grievers are, we know what they look like. They are, again, skyscraper-sized, and I want to stress this, skyscraper, not just building-sized. Nightmare creatures which walk on about a dozen or so different legs, each of which has different spikes and juts coming out of it, which observers have noted each of those spikes ends in another appendage that has digits that can manipulate. The spikes themselves can open up, revealing another set of 12 spikes, each of which can open up, revealing another set of 12 spikes. A Griever can actually pick up a single pebble if it goes down far enough to one of the smallest enough spikes that can pick up something without injuring it. Those spikes can pierce the strongest armor that is known to exist without effort or difficulty. Grievers also have never been observed to be hurt by anything. All of that fire and power we shoot at them whenever they approach one of the fortresses at the edge of the Dyers is to make them turn around. Grievers also, so they've got all these things, and those all terminate in this weird kind of cellular thing that is like, it's got a larger spike up like this, and then a smaller little spike like this. And this smaller pipe also has little blades that come out of it and kind of snick around regularly, making an unusual sound and a horrible cacophony of all the metal slicing and blazing against itself. And yes, it is metal, not chitin or anything like that. It's usually pretty hard to miss a Griever moving, ignoring the massive footsteps it does, but that horrible cacophony of that sound is supposed to be something that actually gives genuine nightmares to anybody who hears it, who is stationed out there. This is one of the reasons why the airships and people who are stationed at the edge of the Dyers are rotated weekly with other military forces in order to make sure nobody has to stay out there too long. As an aside, no one's picked up on this yet, but because of the war, no one's been rotating those people for the last month and a half. They're just stuck out there at the edge of the Dyers. Yes, that will be relevant later. So, that's the majority of the monsters, creatures, beasts, etc. I've mentioned a few other things. There are aurochs. Aurochs are a form of oxen, but a little bit different. The main difference is that aurochs have been magically bred, basically from cows, to be better in every way with regards to us. They actually have better meat, better hide, they produce better milk, that kind of a thing. There are also Pokemon in this setting. Seriously, legitimately, there are Pokemon in this setting. There's no Pokeballs. There's no fighting amongst Pokemon. Pokemon are pets. You can choose a Pokemon. There are places that sell them, and you can purchase one as a pet. They don't actually call them Pokemon in setting. They just call them animals or creatures or whatever. But I'm telling you it's Pokemon because it's easier to explain it that way. One of the party members actually has an Eevee, for example. I'm not going to mention the elementals. They really don't count. I mentioned the thrush. I suppose I should mention the harpies here, because I've mentioned them a few times, we've never really gone into detail. People aren't 100% sure if the harpies are a sapient race or a monster race. They have certainly never tried to communicate or otherwise socially interact with us, but they seem to be fairly intelligent for beasts, so no one's really 100% sure what's onto them. There were harpies on Visay and Lascelles. There are quite a few harpies throughout the Dareth continent, a lot of them, especially in the inner core part of the continent. Harpies are large, humanoid-sized, humanoid-like creatures. They have they have wings that basically grow out of their arms. These wings can vary. Some of them are more bat-like, some of them are dragon-like, some of them are more feather-like, some of them are butterfly-like. There's a variety of different wings that can be produced from them. They can all fly. They appear to be magically flying because their body size and the wings don't support the ability for them to fly just on basic physics. But they can all fly very, very well. They're very good at maneuvering. And there's very little data on where they roost or how they reproduce or anything like that. Most people just view harpies as a nuisance because most of the time the harpies just come to attack caravans for whatever reason. The few times harpies have been traced back to roosts and whatnot, they have found surprisingly elaborate nests, which actually have like multiple rooms with different structures to them, some kind of obvious social hierarchy, that kind of a thing. And then it's all been burned to the ground, so nobody really learned anything otherwise than that. So the harpies are one of those mysteries that's still just kind of sitting there. As an aside, there are other races and other species, other monsters, other beasts that exist in the world, but the party has simply not encountered them yet, so we're leaving those for a future video. Hope you've enjoyed. It was less than an hour and a half this time. I'll see you around, guys.